Welcome to Tiny Show and Tell Us, the bonus series where you write in with your favorite science news or factoid, we read your email aloud, and then we dive deeper. I'm Sam Jones, and I'm here with my co-host, Deboki Chakravarti, as always. And today, we are also joined by Matt Gabriel, creator and host of American Medieval. Hi, Matt.
Hello. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, we're psyched too.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. And Matt, just to catch you up, last time when we did a Tiny Show and Tell Us, we talked about bread tags and we talked about electric pole fires. We actually haven't done this yet because we haven't recorded it, but in the future we will have talked about this.
Fantastic. I don't even know what those words mean, which means that I am in the right place.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so a reminder for all of our listeners that if you have a story you'd like for us to cover on Tiny Show and Tell Us, all you have to do is write us an email. So just email us at tinymatters@acs.org or fill out the form linked in the episode description.
All right, Deboki, I feel like, as usual, when we have a guest, we like to be nice to them.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Do you want to kick things off?
I will go first.
Okay.
So Matt, listeners, we got a submission from listener Steffi who wrote, "Hi, Tiny Matters. I am currently taking a class about fairy tales, and I learned that folklorists use comparative phylogenetic analysis to trace the history of oral narratives across cultures and languages. Phylogenetic analysis was originally developed to study evolutionary biology, so I was super excited to discover that this interdisciplinary method is used to learn about the evolution of stories in addition to species." And then Steffi linked us to the paper, which is from 2016. I'll talk a little bit more about it. But Matt, I'm curious. So you are a historian.
So first off, so cool.
Yeah.
I had no idea that people were doing this.
Yeah. And this was super, super fun to look into. But I'm curious, do you have any familiarity with this concept, idea at all?
No, not with the phylogenetic analysis aspect of things, but the idea of fairy stories and their interconnection across cultures is something, of course, that, historians have talked about for quite a while. So any type of new interdisciplinary method, I am really keen to learn more about.
Awesome. So I'm excited to tell you a little bit about what they were doing with this work. So phylogenetic analysis from the biology perspective, the way that I think about it and the way I've seen it is usually with developing evolutionary trees. We want to understand how one organism kind of begat another and how we're all connected. So put very simply, scientists are looking at the DNA of different organisms and looking to see how similar they are, how different they are. And from that, you can kind of put together these family trees and get this timeline of evolution. You can also use it for figuring out taxonomies from microbiology world. It was really cool because before we had these tools, basically the way that we were categorizing microbes was just by how they looked.
Right.
And it turns out that that's actually really misleading, especially something like amoebas. They're just blobs. And so it's very easy to think all these blobs are related to each other. But then when they went into the DNA and they looked at the actual sequences, it turned out these blobs were not all related to each other. They belonged in different categories.
Sorry, just a little side note. I remember back in college, so this would have been probably, I think I took this anatomy course in 2009. And we were sort of tasked with, based off of what scientists knew at that point, genetically speaking, plus thinking about structure and function of an animal, where it might lie within a phylogenetic tree. And it was so interesting because even, let's say, I don't know, it was probably 17, 18 years ago, we knew so much less than we do now, DNA-wise, that there was still this focus on structure that I'm sure so much of it has been disproven at this point. And I hadn't thought about that. I'm like, oh my God, I was doing the archaic science.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. It turns out the papers from when we were in college are old now.
Deboki, stop playing tricks on me.
Anyway, so speaking about actually old things, researchers decided to do this with folktales. They wanted to see, can we do an evolutionary tree of folktales? Because these stories are kind of like DNA in that they are handed down. They're always changing and evolving. So the idea is, can we track the changes in how these stories are being told to get, sort of kind of like an evolutionary history of these folktales? And so the paper that Steffi sent us was published in 2016 by Jamie Tirani and Sarah Grassa da Silva, and they were working on tracing the roots of Indo-European folktales. But while I was diving into this, I found an older paper written by Tirani from 2013 that, for me, kind of helped me see a little bit more of what they were doing. And this was specifically looking at Little Red Riding Hood and how it sits in relation to a couple different folktales and their variants.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was really neat. So most versions of Little Red Riding Hood today are apparently from a story published in the 17th century in France by Charles Perrault. My French accents are really bad. But that story was actually based on
I was going to say Perrault. So
Charles Perrault. My French teachers are like, we didn't teach her. So that story was actually likely based on an older folktale that's called the story of the grandmother that survived in various versions today. And it turns out, I didn't even get into this. There's like a whole classification of folktale stories that was like really cool. Like maybe one day we'll get into that. But basically, there's a system to categorize these different variants. So there are versions of the story of the grandmother where the little girl is able to outwit the fox. There are versions where she asks to go outside to go to the bathroom. The wolf is like, you can't trick me. I'm going to tie this rope to your ankle to keep you from escaping. So she goes out, but then she cuts the rope and ties it to a tree and she runs away. There's another version where the girl is taking a basket of cakes to her aunt or uncle, but they're actually a witch or werewolf. And on the way there, she eats the cakes and replaces them with donkey poop. So they end up going to her house at night to eat her.
oh no.
These are wild. There's also a version of the story, apparently, where there's a girl in the woods wearing a red baptism tunic who runs into a wolf who takes her back to her lair, and she escapes by taming the wolf cubs. Like, there's all of these different variants there.
Cute.
Yeah. So one of the things that they were curious about in this paper is that there are also versions of folktales in East Asia and then in Central Southern Africa that seem similar. So the East Asian folktale is called the tiger grandmother. There's a group of siblings where they're at home alone, but then some kind of predator, like a tiger, comes in disguised as a grandmother. And the siblings are like suspicious. They let the tiger in, and at night, the tiger eats the youngest one while the other ones escape. So that's like Little Red Riding Hood-ish.
Yeah.
There's this like whole deception and everything. There's also a story from Central Southern Africa where a young girl gets eaten by an ogre pretending to be her brother. The brother later finds out and kills the ogre, then frees the girl by cutting her out of the ogre's belly. So like, again, some similar elements. But adding even more complication, there's also a folktale called The Wolf and the Kids, which is a story where a mom goat tells her goat kids not to open the door while she's out, but a wolf overhears and impersonates her so that he can get in and eat the kids. And there's a version of this from Aesop's Fables where the kids listen to their mom and they don't get eaten. So like very clear moral. So there's all these different folktales going on. And basically what they wanted to do with this paper is figure out, could we do this phylogenetic analysis to figure out, like, are the East Asian tales and the African tales, are they more like Red Riding Hood or are they more like The Wolf and the Kids? Like, can we kind of trace like more commonalities to one story versus the other?
Right.
So they looked at 58 variants of these stories that have an English translation, and they focused on 72 plot variables, like what type of protagonist do we have? What type of villain? How does the villain trick the protagonist? What's the fate of the protagonist? And they mapped out this phylogenetic tree, and they found that the African tales are more like The Wolf and the Kid, and the East Asian stories blended elements from both of these stories and other tales.
Huh.
And then in the more recent work, they used this phylogenetic analysis to basically kind of trace how far back they thought different folktales might go.
Right.
So they traced Jack and the Beanstalk to a group of stories called The Boy Who Stole Ogre's Treasure that went back at least, I think, around 5,000 years ago. Beauty and the Beast, Rumpelstiltskin were around 4,000 years old. And The Smith and the Devil was a story about a blacksmith who makes a deal with the devil, basically giving up their soul to weld any material, but then like uses that to trick the devil by basically like welding them to an immovable object. That story, they like estimated, went back 6,000 years.
Wow.
So yeah, that's like kind of like the further usage of this technique. But I just thought it was really neat.
Yeah. So the Little Red Riding Hood that we know, that is like an offshoot of, like, if I'm thinking about the phylogeny, what would be the order?
That would be the story of the grandmother, or likely the story of the grandmother, that then got like published in the 17th century by Charles Perrault.
Oh, right.
As I'm sure he wants to be known.
Yeah.
I think he went by Chuck, actually.
Yes.
Whoa, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. Huh.
I'm curious about, like, were you familiar with any of these folktales? I'm curious, like, for you, like, does folktales come up? Like, you talked a little bit about, like, being interested. I'm so curious what that would look like for you.
Yeah, not necessarily folktales per se, but like one of my specific kind of research interests is how people in the Middle Ages told stories about the past, which involved a lot of legendary characters, and there are kind of folktale-ish elements in some of those. My first book was on the legend of Charlemagne, which is 9th century emperor. So like later kind of legends that grew up around him. And one of those was about kind of the sleeping emperor, in which he didn't actually die, but he lays kind of in a mountain waiting for, the right time to return and save us all. But you see the same motif with the stories of King Arthur, for example, and then it's associated with a bunch of other kings, both in medieval Europe, but then outside of Europe as well. So there's some commonalities there, which probably can be traced to larger kind of mythic ideas about the, good kings and how they will return to save us, and messianism back to, ancient Israel and, things of that nature. It is really interesting, though I hadn't thought of it this way, but when historians talk about manuscripts, we don't use the term phylogeny or however. I'm going to mispronounce it just like Perot. But we talk about like manuscript stemma, for example, in which we try to trace kind of earlier versions and determine offshoots and kind of groupings within that of genuses and species within those. So I think maybe we have been doing some of this work without acknowledging the debts that we have to the sciences for a long time there.
Well, I mean, people have been categorizing things before we even really knew that's what we were doing. So it totally makes sense.
Yeah. I wonder, I'm like, when did phylogenies in science really become a thing? A while ago. But that kind of thing had been happening for a really long time. People finally were like, there's a word for this. There must be a word for this.
Yeah. I mean, definitely once we figured out that we could reconstruct via DNA sequences, these kinds of clear taxonomy, or sorry, not even taxonomies. Taxonomies are part of it, but that definitely created a lot of what we now experience with biology.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating. I remember interviewing a microbiologist who does some of the phylogenetic stuff, but her background was with microscopy. And she was talking about how one of the weird shifts in the field is that a lot of the students she works with today, they don't even know what the organisms they are working with look like. They really just know them at the level of the DNA, but because they're so ingrained on that DNA side, they don't engage as much with them on actually seeing what they look like in the microscope and what their behavior is like, which was a thing that when I was thinking about this submission was something that was really interesting, where I was is there a point where you break a story down so much into the components that you lose what the original story is, or not necessarily lose, but you abstract so much further away from it. But at the same time, you get potentially really fascinating information too from it.
Yeah, I think, with this thing about folktales, and again, I don't know the research, so I would be hesitant to make any kind of definitive pronouncements, but the key is kind of, I think what you're suggesting, Deboki, is to make sure that you take an interdisciplinary approach, because one of the things you can lose sight of as you were kind of describing this is because if you break a story down to its constituent parts, it's not a story anymore, but it exists as a story, and it exists as a story for a particular reason, which is a particular kind of historical moment which can be captured. And we don't know what oral storytelling existed because we only have written records of things. So we can guess at kind of how far back these stories kind of go and stuff like that. Maybe dealing with kind of syntax and word choice and kind of comparative methods like that. But we have to be kind of a little bit humble before those conclusions to understand that, when Perot wrote these stories down in the 18th century, he was getting it from somewhere and we don't really know where he was getting it from. And there could have been a village over that he didn't visit, or a grandmother over there that was telling a very different story. And he thinks this is kind of encapsulating a bigger thing, but he was dealing with the evidence that he had. So, which doesn't mean that it's not valid or interesting to talk about, but it is kind of, we do need to kind of limit our conclusions when you kind of approach it, at least from a humanities standpoint, thinking about the way that these stories kind of pass down.
Totally.
Yeah.
That was actually offered up a great segue when it comes to guessing at how old things are. I thought that could be a way to get into your story as well that you submitted to us.
You guys are really good at this podcast thing. So this segue would just kind of worked really well.
You offered it right up for us.
Laid it out on a platter. So, well, all right. So yeah, I am really excited. So I am, as we've been talking a little bit, I'm a historian. I'm a historian of the European Middle Ages. Host of the podcast American Medieval. Makes sense because I'm interested in the Middle Ages. But I came across this essay which talked about the Greenland shark recently. And the essay itself is a little bit older. It was published in London Review of Books back in 2020, but it was the first time I had seen it. And so it kind of sent me down a rabbit hole. So I want to learn more about Greenland sharks, because the thing that it talked about is Greenland sharks are some of the oldest or the longest surviving animals in the world. And because of recent kind of advances in science, they were actually able to figure out that they lived somewhere oftentimes between 250 and 500 years. Maybe even longer than that. Nobody's really kind of sure, because they exist kind of way down in the ocean where Nobody's seen them mate. Nobody's seen them reproduce, or give birth or anything like that. They're just kind of there. But as a medieval historian, both in my teaching but also in my research, just trying to conceptualize how long ago things are, because 500 years ago from now is like 1526. Like we're in the era of the Reformation then, right? Like there's a Greenland shark that's probably swimming in the ocean right now that was alive when Martin Luther was posting his 95 Theses on the church door. There might be one who was alive when Columbus set out.
Right.
From Spain before and then like beyond that, like just their parents, like 500 years beyond that, we're talking about like the kind of the era of the barbarian migrations and the Roman Empire almost. So that just is inconceivable to me, like the length and the slowness of a life in which hours are compacted into, ballpark 100 years or something like that, but just like 5 times that and even more, just kind of astonishing. So I want to know more about the Greenland shark.
I love that because I feel like that is such a challenge for me is like, I don't think of time in that way. Like I don't have like as concrete of like a sense of like, right, that's what was happening on at that point. So like when I hear these times, I'm like, that sounds old. Like that sounds really, really old.
It is real old. Yeah.
But like, I think it ends there. Like anything that's like older than like 150 years old to me is like, that's like practically immortal to me. But it's cool to be like, right, like they might have been around for that.
Right.
So I am here to talk about how old Greenland sharks are, but I'm also here to talk about how old they might not be.
Ooh.
Because this is fun. This is fun because like, I think there's a little bit of beef, and I don't know if the scientists, maybe this is not fair to the scientists. I think some scientists might disagree with these age estimates, and that's like my favorite thing is when
we love talking about science beef. It's the best. Yeah. It is the best. Yeah. Also, can I just say like, so I have this, I don't know when I started doing this, but like whenever I think about my age or other people's ages or like my grandmother's age, I like to think about the year that they were born. And if they were born closer to whatever date in the past, that's like a memorable date. It's like the Civil War, World War I, like whatever it is, or today. And like I think when I realized that my grandma was born, because now she's 93, that she was born closer to the Civil War than today, it like messed with my brain. Yeah. And so I like thinking about that as well.
I don't know. That's
sorry.
A lot. Thank you.
Yeah, it's going to mess with you. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. That is.
Please continue.
So in 2016, there was this paper that came out, which is where like that estimate comes from. So they were estimating that Greenland sharks are somewhere between like 272 to 512 years. Like that's their lifespan, with the most likely average being around 390 years, which is a really long time. And part of what made this paper really cool is that it's actually really hard to estimate the age of Greenland sharks. I mean, obviously you can't just like walk up to one, ask one. You can't like with really long living creatures. We weren't around 500 years ago to like tag them and be like, oh, cool, you're still around. So what scientists usually do with sharks is they look at certain bony structures that get these little like calcified stripes on them, and you can count them kind of like the rings in a tree trunk. But Greenland sharks don't have those bony structures, so it's really hard to estimate their age. So what they did is they actually looked at the lens in their eyes. They looked at 28 female sharks, and they chose the lens because it's like inactive, like metabolically. Like it doesn't have like all of the chemistry that would be going on that would make it hard to kind of do the experiments that you want them to do. And also the lens get new layers as the sharks get older. And so they looked at the innermost part of the lens, so like the lowest layer, and they measured the amount of the specific carbon isotope in it, which is a technique called radiocarbon dating. And so this works in part because nuclear weapons tests in the 1960s released a huge amount of radiocarbon that were absorbed by a lot of different organisms, including ocean organisms like sharks. So sharks that have less radiocarbon in their eyes have to have been born before 1960, and you can basically use that amount to kind of backdate and figure out how old they might have been. Maybe we'll like get to that in a little bit. They also use prior data about the birth size of Greenland sharks and like the growth rate of fish to calculate that age range for these older sharks. So for the two biggest sharks that they had, they estimated their age to be around 335 and 392 years old, which is like, that's old. Like that's really old, which is really cool. Some more details that I thought were really interesting is that sharks are estimated to reach their maturity at around 150 years. So like that feels like
when's
a long
puberty?
time.
Like when's puberty? You're like, oh,
I don't know, but like so like I don't know if like full maturity is like the end of puberty, like but
yeah,
that's taken a while.
Yeah. Oh my God. I hit puberty late, but like that's next level.
Imagine having like being an angsty teenager for like 90 years.
I know. Yeah.
Oh, geez.
That made me think about, there was this like whole, this is not related to sharks. I should not go down this road, but we're stuck. There's this whole paper I remember reading about like angsty teenage elephants. I think they realized part of the issue was that it was like particularly boy elephants were like causing all of this ruckus in this like, I think, wildlife park. And they realized it was partly because I think poaching had maybe killed a lot of the male elephants. And so they didn't have like role models, basically.
Oh.
I don't know what it's like for the sharks, but like it makes sense for the elephants. They're super social. Like that's probably a huge part of their life. Anyways, some great news for you, Matt, for this story is that 2026 has been like a pretty good year, it seems like, for Greenland shark research.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Last month, some research was published on the whole genome sequence of the Greenland shark.
Hey, phylogeny
We're in
is
it.
going
Yep.
crazy.
Yep. So they mapped out around 96.7% of the genome, and they found like some potential genes that could help with shark longevity. These are proteins that help stabilize the DNA structures. There are genes that are involved with like repairing DNA and regulating the immune system. Also, maybe some genes that help with iron metabolism and like reduce how much oxidative stress they're going to get, which is like a big reason why we experience aging, because oxygen is this incredible molecule that's also terrible for your body. And so all of these things, like these traits, seem to be things that would reduce the likelihood of DNA damage that could lead to cancer. So that might be a big factor in why they live a long time.
Greenland sharks are going to save us someday.
They're going to save us. Yeah.
Mark it down.
This article that I was reading in Live Science, they were interviewing a scientist who was skeptical of that 400-year age estimate, basically because they're skeptical about the use of using radiocarbon isotopes to measure the age of Greenland sharks, specifically because Greenland sharks are known to live really deep in the ocean. So their challenge is like, would bomb radiocarbon reach them at the same rate as it reaches other organisms? So like if you're using this isotope to estimate their age, you're doing that based on the assumption that they're affected in the same way that other organisms are, but we might not be able to make that assumption. So they think the estimate might be high, though they said that they still think that the Greenland sharks are still really old, like at least 200 years. But there's also another paper published recently from the beginning of the year, which was about another very famous detail about Greenland sharks, which is the fact that they're thought to be blind. Their eyes are cloudy. They're actually parasites dangling from their cornea.
Oh, that hurts to think about.
Yeah. And they live in dark water. So like, you know, it kind of made sense that maybe the Greenland sharks, they can't see. But researchers were looking at the retinas of Greenland sharks, and they found that the retinas are still able to detect light, which suggests that they're not blind. But the reason why I loved this Guardian article about Greenland sharks is that they also interviewed a shark expert who was skeptical. And I'm just going to read the quote because I liked it. This type of dating method is challenging to use for aging animals that are hundreds of years old. In some ways, it was a surprise that the paper was published in Science, one of the top-tier ecology journals in the world. I just appreciated being like straight up like, how did this get published?
Wow.
Yeah, that's direct.
Yeah, they said the technique requires further validation for use in this context. Just academic for I hate this.
Also, that's a way for people to not home in on your complaints because you're just like, why are you talk like that? Stop talking like that.
I love it. And please talk more like this. I need to know all of the techniques that you think require more validation and what issues you have with the papers.
But I love that, like, that's the quote.
Yeah.
Like, I love that that is the quote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. But the point is that Greenland sharks are, in fact, very old, and we don't know how old they are, and they're very mysterious. Like, I really enjoyed this article that I was reading, which we'll have linked in the show notes, because it was really about the fact that there's so many aspects of Greenland sharks that we take for granted. Like, we thought they're blind. They're often portrayed to be really lazy and slow, but actually they are just creatures that we don't know very well. And so they actually might be better predators than we know. Part of the reason why they're thought of often as scavengers is related to the fact that they can't see very well. But like maybe if they can see well, and there are also these stories of them maybe being like actually better hunters than we think, like they seem to contain multitudes that we don't understand.
Yeah, and if they're found so deep in the ocean also, like this is the big issue with us not knowing very much about the deep sea. You're not seeing them all the time. Like they're harder to study.
And that's actually like another weird aspect of it where so there are times where they're in Greenland, but I think what I had read is they're also found sometimes around the Caribbean, but it's like when they're in like the Arctic waters,
misnomer.
Like they actually aren't as deep in the ocean because it's so cold. So it's just they're living just these lives that we don't know very well, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
The ocean is crazy.
It's crazy.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Especially that deep sea stuff. Like it's just every time that I read something about it, it's just the vastness of the scope of the deep ocean and how little we know about what's actually down there.
Yeah.
And even the things we know that are down there, like what are they doing down there?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know.
What a great moment to plug a recent episode we did about deep sea mining and deep sea mystery. But I mean, it's so true. I mean, like, I feel like I've written now for Tiny Matters, like a bunch of stuff about space and a few things about the deep sea. And every time both of those come up, somehow the deep sea is actually more mysterious than space, even though space is also incredibly mysterious. Like,
it is.
The deep sea, just the level of question mark there is wild.
Well, it's also this thing where, like, I think we've talked about this in one of those episodes where, like, okay, yes, space is also mysterious, but isn't it wild that we're like on this planet and that the ocean on the planet that we live on is just still, like, we know nothing.
Yeah.
Comparatively, we know nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much water on this planet. It's like
there really
obscene.
is. Mostly water.
Like you were talking about like Sam, you were joking about like not knowing dates and stuff like that. Like as a humanist, like I don't think about like there's just this tiny bit of land really here. And then there's so much, like the Pacific Ocean is so big.
Yeah.
It's so big and it's so crazy. And like there's so much stuff down there that we just don't know about. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Right. It's like when stuff disappears, you're like, how could it have disappeared in the ocean?
Yep.
Like, I don't know. Can't we like find it? Just like go down to the bottom, you know?
I've dropped things in my pool before. I can just find it. It's not a big deal.
Like, how hard is it to just put a camera everywhere in the ocean? Yeah, I remember, like, even in cases where, like, I wasn't talking about the ocean has come up. Like, I was interviewing, I think, someone who's working with seismographs, and she was telling me about how, like, there are these seismographs that will, like, pick up, I think seismographs in, like, the ocean or some kind of acoustic technology in the ocean where they'll pick up, like, whale songs from so far away that they just, like, couldn't even explain them at first. It's just wild to be, like, we're in a world that has that going on, that we just, we have no clue.
We really don't. So, Matt, do you have more respect for the Greenland shark now? Even more?
1,000%. I'm 100% team Greenland shark, regardless of whatever petty kind of interscientific beef is going on in that one quote that you read. Like, I am on the shark side here.
Right.
So,
Yeah. We need a little bit of drama in science, though. I think it keeps people feeling passionate, inspired about their work, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why I love it, too, is because I think it's easy to think that science is, like, consensus, but like, I mean, I think this is true across all fields.
Absolutely.
Like, actually, these fields exist because people are asking questions and disagreeing with each other. And I think that's like actually the heart of what makes it exciting and like what makes things change and helps our understanding it better. So I love the pettiness, but I also just love being like, oh yeah, it's important to not take that information for granted.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the core of the kind of question I think that guy was getting at, right, is about rigor, right? Is like, you used a procedure, it seemed to work, but like, does it actually work? Like, that's a really good question. It's a really important question.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious for you, like in history, what that looks like when you're looking at, like if you're reading someone's work, like what does that critical lens look like? What are the questions that you're asking to kind of make sure that you're engaging rigorously?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with, like similarly, I think to sciences, it has a lot to do about methodology, is being honest with your reading of the sources, making sure that you understand the particular context in which you're speaking of. You know, if you're talking about something in the 12th century, that's different than something in the 8th century or something in the 16th century, just staying like in the Middle Ages. So, you know, you can make certain claims about certain things in the 12th century that you can't make in the 8th century or in the 16th century. And you have to understand, you know, the vast kind of literature that kind of goes beyond that of all the research that has led up to that point. But at the same time, and I think this goes back to kind of what I was saying earlier about kind of the humility you have to have, I think, as any kind of researcher, is understand that this is my best, not a guess, but like this is the way that I understand it. I am going to show you all the work that I've done and how I understand it this way and why I understand it this way. And then if you come along and tell me, you know, that I'm wrong and here's all the reasons why, and you demonstrate that, like that's how that conversation happens. That's how we learn more.
Right.
That's how the kind of web of knowledge that we have as human beings kind of expands. And that's part of that whole process. I had a guest on my podcast, it was released a couple of weeks ago, in which he said, you know, I don't need to be right. I need to get it right. Which I think is, it's not centering yourself in that equation, but just like, listen, we're all working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
Right. I like that.
I think it leaves a lot of space to be wrong too. Like that's like kind of what's important, to be like, yep, I'm going to be wrong sometimes, but that's like part of the process of it all.
Right.
Oh, let me tell you how many times I have been wrong. So you could ask my son too, because he would have some thoughts on this as well. So.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. This was really great. Tell the people where they can find you.
Oh, well, thank you guys for having me. This has been a lot of fun. Again, I am Team Shark. That's one of the most important takeaways, I think, from my guesting here.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I would be delighted if people would check out my podcast, American Medieval, a proud member of the Multitude Podcast Collective. And also, you can just find me online at Prof. Gabriel, Gabriele, E at the end, .com, and learn all about, hopefully, the European Middle Ages and find something interesting there to share.
There's so much interesting there, so I'm sure people will check it out. And we will also have links to all of that in the show notes.
Great.
I want to also thank Steffi for submitting a very cool Tiny Show and Tell Us that ended up being the perfect fit for today. And Tiny Show and Tell Us is a bonus series from Tiny Matters created by the American Chemical Society and produced by Multitude. You can send us an email to be featured in a future Tiny Show and Tell Us episode at tinymatters@acs.org, or you can fill out the form that's linked in the episode description. And we'll see you next time.